It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Deep breath. Are you okay? I ask because Holly Willoughby returned to the sofa today. Listen.
Right, deep breath. Firstly, are you okay?
Well, are you? Don't know about you, but I am not okay, no. I am traumatised by the Harry and Phil nonsense. Harry and Phil, see what I did there? All of it put together. But Holly returned today. I have to confess, I did tune in and I did watch and I was fascinated. I find the whole thing now ridiculous and I am a little bit traumatised because I still do not believe that what we're seeing is the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. I wonder, what do you make to it all? I think it is frankly ridiculous. And Rishi Sunak has also been speaking out today. Listen.
Our approach is working.
Is it working? Well, I can tell you now, there's been a lot of air circulating, and I don't mean of the hot variety being chatted. I mean the freezing cold variety that has made us all chilly. I personally say it's the wind to thank, not Rishi Sunak's plans when it comes to reducing the boat crossings. Am I being harsh, or do you agree? And 2/3 of Brits say that trans people, trans women so-called, should not be in female spaces. Do you agree with them? And how much do you earn? I know it's not an English thing, British thing to ask that question, but I am asking because 30 people now are going to be given £1,600 for doing the square root of nothing, a trial of universal basic income. Is this the future? Or are we just breeding a nation of burn-idle nothingness dependent on the state? And get this, the biggest study of its kind has dropped today, everybody. Lockdowns are likely, it says, to represent the biggest policy mistake in modern times. Goodness gracious me, tell me something we don't already know. Anyway, we'll have all of that to come and more, but first, the news.
Michelle, thank you. The top stories at 6 o'clock on GB News. The Prime Minister says his plan to tackle the arrival of illegal migrants to the UK in small boats and the asylum backlog is starting to work, but he admits there's still a long way to go. During a speech in Kent, the Prime Minister said small boat crossings were down 20%. Rishi Sunak also announced a further 2 barges to accommodate a further 1,000 migrants, but wouldn't comment on where the barges would be located. The Prime Minister says the government's using every tool at its disposal to tackle illegal migration.
We've now returned 1,800 to Albania in just 6 months. We've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50, in line with our European partners. And what is the result of all of this? Well, so far this year, the number of Albanian small boat arrivals has fallen by almost 90%.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has welcomed the news, but says the government still needs to secure more return agreements with other countries.
I think everybody wants to make sure that we stop the boats. We don't want people making that dangerous journey. All we've really had from the government, though, is the announcement of a policy that doesn't work, then the re-announcement of the same policy, essentially. And it often feels, I think, like Groundhog Day. And meanwhile, that's costing a fortune for the taxpayer. And there's this growing sense of frustration. I mean, I'm at Hinkley Point C here today. Fantastic project. It's behind schedule, and there's a frustration here.
Well, in other news today, the Metropolitan Police says Conservative MP Bob Stewart has been charged with 2 public order offences alleged to have happened in December last year. Scotland Yard says the 73-year-old had been charged with a racially aggravated offence after an incident in central London. The force has said he will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court in July. Thousands of British Airways and Boots employees are among those who've had their personal data breached following a cyber attack. BA says their staff were among those hit by the attack on Zealous. That's a payroll provider used by hundreds of companies across Britain. Pharmacy group Boots also said the attack had included some of its employees' personal details. It includes names, addresses and banking details. The judge hearing Prince Harry's case against Mirror Group newspapers says he was surprised the Duke didn't attend the High Court today. It was previously thought Prince Harry would attend to give evidence over claims the newspaper articles contained information that were gathered using unlawful methods. But it's now been confirmed Harry will enter the witness box tomorrow to give that evidence. Mirror Group newspapers is contesting the claims. An inquest into the deaths of 2 young people at a beach in Bournemouth found they both died of drowning. 17-year-old Joe Abbes and 12-year-old Suna Khan were rescued from the sea last Wednesday, but both later died in hospital. Suna's mum says no parent should ever have to go through what she and her family are experiencing. The Foreign Secretary's held talks with the President of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, in the capital, Kyiv. Ukraine's president has thanked the UK for their continued support amid the country's counter-offensive to the Russian invasion. The pair discussed Russia's possible membership to NATO after Rishi Sunak supported the country joining the organisation last week. And as you've been hearing, Holly Willoughby has returned to the daytime TV show this morning for the first time, following co-presenter Phillip Schofield's exit. Opening her show alongside new This Morning presenter Josie Gibson, Miss Willoughby said she felt shaken, troubled and let down by Schofield after he'd admitted to an affair with a much younger male work colleague.
You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process. And it's equally hard to see the toll that it's taken on their own mental health. I think what unites us all now is a desire to heal for the health and well-being of everyone.
In the United States, former US Vice President Mike Pence will be running for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. Pence will run against the former US President and frontrunner at the moment, Donald Trump. He's expected to formally launch his campaign with a video and a speech on Wednesday. Full details on that right here, GB News. And lastly, Princess Eugenie has announced the birth of her second child. It's a baby boy. He's called Ernest George Ronnie Brooksbank. She posted a photograph on her Instagram account earlier on today saying little Ronnie was born on the 30th of May. Princess Eugenie says son August is loving being a big brother already. On TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for that, Polly. I've got to say, I love that name, Ernest. I'm a fan of old-fashioned names. You don't hear many of those these days, do you? It's very cute. Congratulations. Anyway, I am Michelle Dewberry and I am with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and a senior GB News political commentator, Nigel Nelson. What a job title there,
Isn't
Nigel.
it just?
Very important this man is, I can tell you. You know the drill, though. It's not just about us three. It is you at home as well. You really matter to this programme. I love to hear what you think. What is on your mind tonight? gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But of course, today was the day, wasn't it, everybody? Was it etched into your calendars? Did you have a sleepless night with anticipation? What am I talking about, of course? Well, it's a lot to process, isn't it? And I do hope that you are all OK, because the Phillip Schofield saga, the ridiculousness continues, because the presenter's former co-host, Holly Willoughby, spoke out this morning on her first day back to the sofa. Did you have a little listen? Was you there with me? I've got to say, it's not normally my kind of thing, but I did. I found myself glued to it, actually. Fascinated, a little bit of popcorn out early in the morning. Let's have a listen.
Feels very strange indeed, sitting here without Phil. And I imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have. Shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on, and full of questions. You, me and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth.
Ugh, give me a break. Shaken, troubled, worried. I cannot help but think, honestly, people, that some people just have their views of themselves and their own importance slightly beyond where they should be. I'm not shaken nor troubled. I found the whole thing a ridiculous circus. I don't believe a fraction of what gets said when it comes to some of these quarters and some of the goings-on within it. I found so much of it fake, full of hypocrisy. And, yeah, it don't wash with me, I'm afraid. Alex Dean, what do you make to it?
I think you've got to give a sense of fair due process and fair play to ITV, because this is a situation in which at least two of the principals on the agreed facts have systematically lied about what happened in the past. That is to say that Schofield and his lover, both on the facts that they present as we understand them, say that they lied to ITV repeatedly. Now, if you're in a situation like that, the right thing to do, if you do think there have been wrong goings-on and doings, and if you think there's been abuse of power and so forth, is to have an investigation, which is what they've announced. And in those circumstances, it seems to me, for a limited period of time and for a specific purpose, we should let ITV have their investigation before casting judgment.
Nigel?
Well, I think we'll probably find out from the Select Committee when they actually haul all the ITV executives in front of them. That's the kind of independent inquiry, I think, that a lot of people have been calling for. I'm surprised that Parliament decided it was a matter for them. Like you, I haven't been shaken or stirred by the whole thing.
Maybe there's something wrong with us. Maybe we should be traumatised as a nation.
Well, it's a question of actually whether you watch This Morning every morning. I mean, I used to watch it when I appeared on it years ago, but I haven't done since. I've been watching it a bit, actually, since this. I mean, their viewer figures have gone up on the basis of that. But the whole kind of drama seems a bit like sort of the morning show with Holly Willoughby playing the Jennifer Aniston role. So any second now she could be overtaken by a rival star.
You see, I'm quite new to this media TV game, and I've got to say that quite a lot of it is quite kind of hypocritical, a little bit two-faced, and I don't think we've quite seen the end of all this. But shall we move on to more important matters, I think? Rishi Sunak, our Prime Minister, did you hear that? He was making a speech this morning saying that basically his migration policies, when it comes to small boats, are working. Nothing like taking credit and having the confidence in what you're trying to achieve. However, though, many people are pointing out, not least, by the way, our own Nigel Farage, that yes, indeed, small boat crossings have reduced. But you might have noticed it has been full of deep, heavy wind recently. So what do you reckon? Are his policies working, or is this just a load of hot air, Alex?
Well, some of the short-term impact may be down to the weather, no doubt about it. But the other thing that's undeniable, in my view, is that his policies have realised success in at least one quarter, which is the number of Albanians coming by small boat has dramatically reduced. The numbers overall are bad this year. They're bad, and they've been getting worse. In order to really judge whether these policies are going to work, you need to spend the money he's been talking about in the speech today. You need to really beef up Border Force. You need to put more money into our immigration services that are responsible for seeking out, prosecuting, and then, if found not to have a legitimate asylum claim or refugee claim, deporting those people who are in our country. That's when the numbers will really go down. For me, the most significant statistic here isn't actually the number of people who come across the channel in the short term. It's the speed with which we send those without lawful claims back. But once you start doing that, people who are willing to pay these vast networks of criminality and people smugglers to take them across a continent before they try and come across one of Europe's busiest bodies of water, once they get that message that if you haven't got a real claim, you're going to go back, they'll stop coming.
Yeah, he said, we've gone from accepting around 1 in 5 Albanian asylum cases to now just 1 in 50. He says that is in line with our European partners. Nigel, I think we've become a laughingstock in this country. You know, you've got situations now, we were discussing it on my programme on Friday, where you've got people apparently, you know, desperately trying to protect their own safety, while simultaneously sitting in this country having received a welcome and money and support and all the rest of it, sitting there picking and choosing. I don't want that bedroom. I don't want to share a room with him and all the rest of it. I do. I think it's gone beyond a joke now. And I'm not sure that Rishi Sunak celebrating this tiny little win is anything to be celebrated right now. I think the way to go, the length of the road we've got to walk is incredibly vast.
No, I think Nigel Farage is right. It's the weather that stopped people coming over. Let's see where we are come August and when things are calmer. I mean, the kind of things that Rishi Sunak was hailing today as a success were getting down the backlog of asylum seekers. He's got it down by 1 in 10. I mean, 17,000 sounds like a good figure, but there are 175,000 they've still got to process. He's right. I think Alex has made a good point about the Albanians, that it does look as if the fact we've got a returns deal with Albania has made a difference, in which case, why is Rishi Sunak not now redoubling his efforts to get the returns agreements with European countries, which we lost through Brexit?
Do you think we should have any instance at all where any asylum claim is even remotely considered from any country which is not a kind of serious war or serious decline or whatever? So a relatively safe country, blanket rule, 0 asylum claims process.
Well, I mean, the only way you can actually make a claim for an asylum is if you can't go back to your home country. So it's likely to be war, famine, you're being persecuted or whatever. And that's the whole point about them coming over here, to actually prove that they are genuine asylum seekers. Every refugee starts out as an asylum seeker. Not every asylum seeker turns out to be a refugee. What we need to do more than anything else is change the system where they have to be physically in Britain to claim asylum, that would be the best way of stopping...
So you would have a system or a tent or a body or whatever it is in Calais doing some of this process?
Well, it doesn't matter where it is. I mean, you'd either do it through the through refugee camps, as we did with Syrian refugees. You process them there. If embassies and consulates were able to cope with those processing, but either way, you process offshore.
Do you think, Alex, if someone is sitting outside of a hotel, a central London hotel nonetheless, sitting there saying, I don't want to stay there, I don't want to be X amount in a room, I don't want to be in this size bedroom, I want this and I want that. Do you think you should be allowed to pick and choose?
I generally don't. I'm going to sound like a beating heart. I do realise that there are certain elements of ethnic strife amongst people who come here and claim asylum and refugee status. And if you had two people in a single room on bunk beds, one above and one below, who came from opposite sides of an ethnic divide that had led to a terrible civil war, I can see why that might not be advisable. But generally speaking, no, you shouldn't be able to pick and choose. I know plenty of people who've been backpacking and stayed 4 to a room or more in hotels for lengthy periods of time. The point is, people, if you don't want to stay in a hotel like that, it's down to a preference in the end. You don't like it very much. But we're told the individuals seeking their asylum status or refugee status here are desperate for their lives. They have fled appalling, terrible things. Well, if that is the case, if that's the nature of these claims, you wouldn't mind being on a bunk bed.
You see, I don't know if I'm getting harsh in my old age, but I don't believe a lot of the tales that I'm told. I sit there and I think, first and foremost, if I was going to be persecuted or my life was in danger, the very first thing I would do is gather my family, so my child, my partner, maybe, if he's not been annoying that day, I'd gather my loved ones and I would get us collectively to safety. I wouldn't leave my loved ones behind, point one, so I find it very odd that everyone seems to come alone.
Would you bring a child over on a boat, though? On a small dinghy that's a little better than a paddling pool?
No, I would not. And actually, I will never, until my dying days, forget the image of, and I hope I don't get the name wrong, I think he was called Alun Kurdi.
Yeah, that's right,
a little boy who was,
on the
I think he was
Turkish
about
beach.
2. He was the same age as what my little boy is now. I'll never forget that image, ever. But I don't mean to sound harsh, I really don't. That family was safe. They were out of their home environment. They was in a safe place. And if safety is your priority, then why on earth would you put your toddler or your child in a boat? There's no reason from a safety perspective. There's no reason.
No, but it is desperation, and I think that's what one has to appreciate.
But desperate for what? Because you're already safe.
Well, you're not really safe. I mean,
in France?
If they'd applied for asylum in France, then that's fine. And that's what the returns agreement would have done, by the way. They wouldn't have been able to apply for asylum.
No, but they asked, if their primary concern is safety, then you've ticked that box.
By the time they're on the north coast of France, they're not desperate.
Well, if they're living in a tent in Calais, they probably are. So
they're in a safe country. They can apply for asylum there.
Well, they could apply for asylum there. In fact, they would have actually passed through if they've come from somewhere in the Middle East. They would have passed through an awful lot of safe countries before they'd actually got to Calais to come here. The draw here, obviously, is the language. A lot of them speak English, and they may have friends or relatives.
But that's preference. That's nothing to do with being desperate.
No,
or
I take the point about the safety thing, and that's why, again, that the returns agreement is so important. That once you've registered in a country, when we were in the EU, what would happen is if they came here, we could send them straight back to that country where they'd already registered.
People who come for language and families and so forth, one can well understand it. One might want to live. I want to live in the United Kingdom. It's a wonderful place to be. But in the end, they're expressing a preference because they're coming for economic or cultural reasons. It's not about an asylum status or refugee status. They're jurisdiction shopping. I can understand it, but it shouldn't be allowed.
No, but I mean, it's not really necessarily a French problem or a German problem or whatever. It's all our problems. I mean, these are people, if you accept the fact that we should be looking after genuine asylum seekers, it means that every country must play its part in doing that. So the idea that they've got to France, therefore they mustn't cross to Britain, seems to be abdicating our responsibilities by just leaving them in France.
It's not abdicating responsibilities, it's just facing up to the reality that as soon as someone's safe, if they then choose to continue their journey onward, then you've come out of that threshold for, right, I'm desperate for my life now, and now you are selecting your own life. You'll never convince me, I'm afraid, Nigel, because I don't...
I'll keep trying that.
Yeah, but it doesn't... You would not. I don't know, I'll ask you at home, you guys know what you're talking about. Would you ever leave your children, your wife, your family, if genuinely, you thought that they were at risk of persecution and torture and things like that? I would not whatever in a month of Sundays. I suspect I might not be alone. Get in touch and let me know your thoughts on that one. And look, if I came up to you and said, let me give you £1,600 a month, there's no catch. Nothing at all. You can do whatever you want. Sit on your backside all day long. Would you think that that would be a good idea? I suspect the answer would be yes. But what about the long-term impact on that? Wouldn't it just breed a nation of lazy so-and-sos dependent on suckling on the government's teats? What good is that for anyone? We'll get into that in 2.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. I'm with you right through till 7 o'clock. Alongside me, the political consultant Alex Dean and the senior political correspondent at GB News, Nigel Nelson. Carol says Sunak has done absolutely nothing when it comes to immigration, Michelle. She says it's pathetic. We've only got 2 hotels in our town and they've basically been commandeered now, she says, for migrants. People have had their weddings cancelled and their events and all the rest of it. Carol says that Sunak should be sacked over it all. Do you agree or not? Yes, John says Sunak is full of hot air. The amount he's breathing out is enough to inhale all the dinghies, he says. You're not having much sympathy with this situation. You're not having much kind of truck with Rishi Sunak saying that he has reduced the crossings. As to whether or not it's to do with him or the weather, time shall tell. Don't forget, of course, RAF Scampton soon will be filling up with these people. I personally think that that is a disaster waiting to happen. Time, again, will tell on that one. But Get this, everyone. A recent poll has suggested more than 2/3 of Brits do not think so-called trans women should be allowed in female-only spaces. This is a bit of a massive issue. I personally, it's such a divisive issue because I know that some people's eyes will go, oh, God, trans thing again. I personally think this is such an important issue because it is affecting so much now, whether it's syllabuses at school, the education that children are getting. I think it's been normalised, this whole notion that a kid can just be a boy and then decide tomorrow that he's a girl and off you go and into surgery you go, young man, and there's a conveyor belt. It troubles me no end. Where do you stand on this, Alex?
I think you're right, and I admire your perseverance on it because I think that there's a very small group of people in society, but very vocal and quite influential online at least, who have completely the diametrically opposite view to you and vociferously pursue anyone they see as being
they would hate me.
against
They would regard me as a TERF and a whatever.
Correct, and it's that group that has managed to take someone as meek and mild as J.K. Rowling and turn her into a culture warrior. It's that group that will seek to besmirch the name of anyone who says that there is such a thing as a woman, it's an adult human female, and to suggest otherwise is a fantasy. And it's that group that has encouraged the activity of things like the Tavistock Centre, which hasn't just affected the lives of many misguided adults, it's also severely impaired the future of many children upon whom I think life-affecting, life-changing hormone treatment should never be conducted.
I agree, and I know that people are divided and split over this, but I would kind of implore everyone, this is an issue we have to focus on, have to be across, I would argue, for the protection of children. Nigel,
yes,
you're looking at me very perplexed. Why?
We start on the basis of whether or not you accept gender dysphoria as being a genuine condition that needs treatment.
I do.
Well, in which case, then, we start with the position that there are such things as trans women and trans men.
No, I don't have that view. So I completely agree that there will be somebody, that there'll be a few people out there that have the condition, the medical condition that you just referenced, that will feel within themselves that they are not who they are and they want to present as a different gender. I completely accept that, and it must be awful. It must be horrendous to feel that, to live that. But then
a trans woman must be a woman.
No, to me, a trans person is a trans person, someone who does not want to live.
So a separate gender?
Yes, as someone who does not want to live as their biological reality. I wish them no harm, I wish them no ill, but a man declaring that he is a woman, he is not the same as me.
Right, OK. Well, it is certainly true that if you are a biological man, then I would agree with the premise of the question that you don't use women-only spaces.
But you trot out that sentence, respectfully, you trot out that sentence that trans women are women.
Yes, I do.
And that's not true.
So you think a trans woman is a woman?
Yes.
So what's a woman?
Well, I mean, a trans woman can be a woman, and a woman can be a woman.
No, Nigel, what is a woman?
OK, a woman the biological sex and gender is different, so you can be biologically a woman.
Which is what?
An adult
human female. No, don't answer for him, because he's trotting out this sentence and everyone does it. And I don't think, respectfully, you know what you're talking about.
Okay.
What are you talking about? When you say a trans woman is a woman, what do you mean?
I believe that a woman can have a penis.
But look, and are you saying that with a straight face?
Yes, I am, yeah. Because I believe that it is you're absolutely right, it affects very few people, and what they want to do is get on with their lives, but I'm accepting that people have the right to self-identify in the gender of their choosing, especially if they've suffered because of the sex that they have previously.
See, I don't know where we go. How have we reached a point in 2023 where people with straight faces, and you're a good man, you're someone I respect, and you think it's factually accurate to say a woman can have a penis? Yeah. They cannot. If you've got, and I'm so sorry, because you'll be eating your tea, you'll be having your, I don't know, your pie and mash or whatever.
And my Twitter feed is now filling up.
But surely you must know that that's not accurate.
We're so far down the rabbit hole now. One's merely paying lip service to the latest fad of the day when one says, no offence, Nigel, a woman can have a penis. It's so plainly, self-evidently untrue that only a left-wing journalist could think it. I suppose so some social scientists as well. If you ask me as a man to call you Barbara, I might, because I'm polite. But you have no right to compel me to believe that you are in fact a woman. woman, and you have no right to command the rights and treatment of someone who actually is a woman. To directly contradict your position, in my view, a woman does not have a penis and never has.
But where do you draw your line in denying reality? So, like, you know, you're currently saying that a woman can have a penis, and I find that absurd, not gonna lie.
Yeah, well, a lot of people do.
Where do you draw the line then with faking identity, like faking reality? So, for example, is the next stage going to be a biological age? If a guy sits there and says, I'm not a 45-year-old guy, I'm a 2-year-old, so I want to go to a kindergarten.
Well, I mean, that's like saying, you know, can you self-identify as a chihuahua? Clearly not. There are
so where's your line then?
My line is on gender and sex.
But it's basically
so biological sex and then gender being two different things. You mentioned schools, which actually I think are a really good example. Young people don't care that there are young people in schools where people are transitioning and they're perfectly happy about it. The only issue that's come up, and a teacher I was talking to the other day mentioned this, when this happened, they were perfectly happy with a boy becoming a girl. What the girls were unhappy about was her changing in their changing room, and they made different arrangements for that. So if you have a common sense approach to it, all these things are soluble.
You know, I'll say what a common sense approach to this is, because you say, well, the children were happy to accept this. Children would be happy to sit there drinking full-fat Coca-Cola, eating chips, McDonald's, and all of the other junk foods available to them all day, every day. They'd be perfectly happy to love that and accept that. As adults, we then come into the room and we sit there and we say, right, kids, you might think that this is what you want to do with your life and all the rest of it, but as adults, we now need to come in and set some boundaries and all the rest of it because we care for you and we want the right outcomes for you. We want to guide you and help you. And don't you worry about this when you're going around saying that women can have a penis, which is not true. If you've got a biological makeup of you've got your tickle-tackle downstairs, you're not a woman. And I can't, I'm going to just throw it open.
Well, the argument is so polarised that, I mean, the two sides just don't seem to meet along
reality matters, Nigel, reality matters. And when your side of the argument deny basic reality, it is an incredibly slippery slope.
You're prepared to accept at the moment, as far as I can see, 4 genders. So you're prepared to accept male-female, biological male-female, and also accept a trans man and a trans woman. So we have 4 genders.
No. You've got a male.
There are men and women.
You've got a male, a female, and if you want to have this category of a trans person who absolutely should be respected, treated with dignity, should be equal in society, absolutely fine. But you are absolutely fundamentally denying basic biological reality when you trot out sentences.
But what gender is that trans person?
It's not a different gender. You have men, you have women, and then within each of those you might have a very, very small subset of people who are before self-harm and after self-harm. And the idea we should encourage them to go down that route, or who like to play dress-up, what we used to call transvestites, and like to live as if they are the other gender without self-harming. And, all fine and well and good and the stuff of pantomime, but the idea we should encourage it in the end or send them to educate children.
Well, it's not a matter of encouraging it, it's a matter of actually not standing in the way.
Of course you're encouraging it when you say a woman can have a penis, Nigel.
I mean, all I'm saying is that, well, certainly it's not a matter for governments as far as I can see, apart from not to put obstacles in the way of people who want to transition.
Well, there you go. You've heard different sides on that story. Strong feelings on this one, but I make no apology for revisiting this subject because I personally believe it is one of the most important topics right now in our society because it will define the futures of a generation of children. That's what I say, but what do you say? I'll have your thoughts on that in a couple of minutes. Let me ask you a simple question. Would you ever like to be given £1,600 a month for absolutely nothing? Good idea or not? Universal basic income, that is the question I want to debate into.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dewbs and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, Nigel Nelson and Alex Dean alongside me. That conversation rumbled on into the break, so it did. Very important conversation, if you ask me. Lots of feedback coming in. Anthony says, Michelle, you're losing the argument here. Female spaces have cubicles too. I'm just saying they have areas within them. Yeah, and so do men's changing rooms as well. So there you go. I like my own spaces, actually, for females. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Anyway, let me ask you, £1,600 a month. If I came over to you and just offered you it, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to work, you don't have to give anything back. It's just money for free. Would you be interested? I can hear you shouting yes. I think it's equivalent to a £24,000 a year salary if you're out there grafting, that is. I'm asking because, Alex, we're trialling apparently in England, 30 people will be trialling this £1,600 a month for 2 years, universal basic income. They'll be monitored to look at the outcome and all the rest of it. Personally, I worry that this will be a recipe for disaster. I think you're going to remove people's motivations and their drives. I do not think there's anything such as a free lunch from the government, as we found out now, with all of this kind of help out to eat out and COVID loans and all the rest of it. I don't
eat out to help out.
Yeah, that's it. I don't support it, do you?
No, I don't. And I think that it's one of those policies that's been favoured by the more cerebral eggheads on both sides of politics for a while, which tends to point to the fact it's a bad idea. This policy would mean that the person receiving £1,600 would be on roughly double the pensioner who lives next door on £200 a week, would be earning more than some of the people who are working and are living down the street from them. And at £1,600 times 48 grand times 52, £2.5 million cost to the taxpayer. I can think that's not bad. That's better than Diane Abbott School of Maths. That I can think of better ways to spend that money rather than this sort of thing that, in the end, encourages people not to work.
And also, where does this money come from? If you de-incentivise everyone to go out and graft and pay their income tax and all the rest of it into the system, where are you getting this free dosh from?
Well, I'm rather attracted to this idea.
Ah, right.
And it depends which system you actually use. There are a whole load of them out there. Finland, for instance, found that when they tried it nationally with 2,000 people, more of them got employed than in a control group who were on benefits. Now, if this system worked in the actual purest sense, what would happen is when you're born, you get your £1,600 or whatever. It may not be as high as that, it may be higher.
But when you're born?
Yeah, the idea is that it is universal. Every single person would get this money.
This is nonsensical. Why would you give £600 to a one-day-old child?
So as you'll be able to actually look after that child and provide for it. Then what happens as everyone grows up and whether the parents decide what they're doing with it, is work would pay more. You've still got that money. Benefits are abolished completely, so a cumbersome and costly benefit system would disappear. As you work, you either lose the money that you're getting on universal basic income, or it's taken away through the tax system.
So you're de-incentivised to go
the
to
big
work.
thing about it is the saving in money, because you save an entire benefit system if it works. Problem areas are things like, would you need to pay more money for someone who's disabled, who needed a carer? Where do you get to with pensions, for instance? Do you abolish pensions, or do you accept that people have paid in national insurance because they've worked for years and therefore they deserve higher amounts? But there are different ways of actually working it. But the basic idea is worth exploring. I'm not saying we should do it, just that we ought to explore it, and a trial of 30 people isn't big enough.
I'm fascinated to see the outcome of this. You're saying, oh, you could get your universal basic income, and then when you go on to get a job, inch by inch, your UBI comes down as you're earning.
It's a profound disincentive to work at all, isn't it?
I think so. Let me get this straight. I'm going to, us three all start off with 1,600 quid.
Yeah.
And then I go out to work, because I think to myself, I'm a motivated, go-getting individual. I don't want to live off Rishi Sunak, thank you very much. I go and get a job. So then, in order to earn my £1,600, I've got to graft for however long, I don't know, let's just say 40 hours a week, to get myself to the same position as you two. Why would I do that?
Because you'll earn more money by going out to work. And also, as you've pointed out, you would want to go out to work. So that money would come down.
Why would I magically suddenly want to go to work when there's no pressure to? Because the point in job seekers allowance
but this happens with the
you're
benefit
required
system.
to seek a job. No, that's the difference. Currently, you are obliged to try to find a job unless you're sick, right?
Yeah.
If you're comparing your universal benefit to the sick, then you are making, in my view, a profoundly different point. Because until now, I thought you were making a point about the well. This isn't about those who are long-term sick. At the moment, if you're on
everybody.
Exactly. At the moment, if you're on job seekers allowance in the United Kingdom, you are obliged to seek work. You are not on your UBI, right?
No, that's right. You wouldn't have to get a job. You could use the money to go and study, to take an MA. That's what's happened.
Or do sod all.
In America, or do nothing. But the evidence so far of the trials, this is why I'd like to see it trialled properly in this country, the evidence from the trials is that doesn't happen. People feel healthier, both mentally and physically. They actually want to go out to work, and they do.
But then you're going to penalise them by taking the £1,600 off them, because surely if you are, everyone's going to get you 1,600 quid. That should be universal, the clue's in the name, and then you top it up.
It would be universal.
Yeah, but then you're taking it off them when they go to work.
It's a basic income, so the absolute basic is £1,600.
Yeah,
yes. And then as you earn more, if you want to go out to work, if you want to live on that, you can carry on living on that.
Then you've just said, you'll take that £1,600 quid off me.
It's
remarkably.
I mean,
at some point, somebody's got to punch in the balloon. Someone's got to say the emperor's got no clothes. You just said that people felt happier, but people are better mentally and physically. Of course they're happier. You just gave them 1,600 quid for doing nothing. I'd be happier as well.
But those people then decided they wanted to get a job. More of them got a job than people.
Until they realised that you were then going to take the 1,600 quid off them for going to get a work, and then I bet the bottom dollar, some of them went back on. Sometimes, honestly, ladies and gents at home, I think that this world is going mad. Am I alone in that? Maybe you are sitting there saying, yes, absolutely, £1,600 for absolutely anyone and everyone. Why on earth would you want to be absolutely, categorically, resolutely dependent on the government if you didn't have to be? I don't know, you tell me. After the break, get this, a big study has landed today that told us something that I could have told you weeks, months, years ago perhaps. See you in 2, well, we'll get into it.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Coming up, Prince Harry's mission to gag the press and silence freedom of speech about the rich and famous reaches the High Court. But will becoming the first royal to take the stand in 130 years backfire? And can we even trust him to tell the truth under oath? I'll bring you exclusive reporting and insight from Angela Levin, Lady Colin Campbell and Calvin Mackenzie as the country braces for the Duke's explosive testimony. Harry's evidence, the courtroom bombshells, airs on Dan Wootton tonight, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you right through till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, Nigel Nelson and Alex Dean. Still, we've been having interesting conversations tonight. One of my viewers on Twitter, Jason, says, what plant is that Nigel on? I think he means planet, actually, but the plant...
He might mean the other, I don't know.
The plant thing is absolutely relevant, if you ask me. We were just talking about self-identification. Nigel thinks that you can identify as whatever you want. We'll do that again, perhaps, in a different day. Lots of people disagreeing with you there, Nigel, I've got to say. On this universal basic income, that's not really universal, because what Nigel wants to do is take it off anyone that then goes on and gets a job. But anyway, Ronald says, this puts my basic pension to shame. Lots of you saying that, how can you have that amount of money, £1,600, when people that have worked, paid into the system, etc., all their lives don't get a fraction of that. John says, that is just not fair. I've never earned a salary as great as that in all of my working life. Jan says she's done a back of a fag packet calculation. She's come up with the amount of billions a month it would cost. You're asking, where on earth would we get all of that money from? Well, it'd come from the people that decide to go and work, that Nigel would then take off the universal basic income, and it would be up for you to pay everyone else to sit on the backside doing nothing. Not on my watch, won't be happy with that. I'll leave you guys to be the final judge of it all. Anyway, look, let's move on. Do you remember Professor Pantsdown, or should I say Professor Ferguson, and all of his predictions of war during COVID, claiming that more than 500,000 of us could die if we didn't lock down our lives? Well, today, a landmark study conducted by one of the most respected medical schools in the world is out. And folks, the results ain't good. Over 20,000 studies were examined by the Johns Hopkins University, and it seems to me, at least, that lockdowns pretty much did more harm than good. And to quote the report directly, the benefits of lockdown were a drop in the bucket compared to the cost. They go on to say that they most likely represent the biggest policy mistake in modern times. Tell us something we don't know. Yes, they conclude that some of the measures could have saved lives, 1,700 lives across England and Wales, to be precise. And of course, any death is an absolute tragedy and one too many. But let's not forget that a typical flu season could see, I don't know, anywhere between 18,000 and 24,000 deaths. Alas, though, we will have to live with the devastating impacts of prolonged COVID lockdowns for decades to come. And many things are now often talked about, for example, like the damage to the economy, or the damage to kids, or the damage to, say, mental health. But many things, of course, like the devastating number of excess deaths which are sweeping the country right now, seem destined to be nigh on ignored. And if you ask me, that is our nation's shame. What did you make to that report, Alex?
Very interesting statistics you were showing, but I think the most telling thing about what we do next as a country, which is presumably to work out what we got right and what we did wrong in the last pandemic and what we can learn from it, is going so slowly. In Sweden, they produced their report into their proceeding, which is, of course, very interesting because they pursued a different path to the rest of us, basically. They produced their report 15 months ago. I don't know anyone who thinks we're going to see our report in 15 months' time. You can't, these are years at a time, kind of delays into these investigations. I mean, you think about how long we took. Leveson took ages, and we didn't even get Leveson Part 2. Our report into Bloody Sunday was like decades after it occurred. Grenfell Tower, an incident that happened in one location on one day, still ongoing 7 years later. Whatever the outcomes of inquiries, no matter how hard it is for governments, we've got to get to the answers sooner than we are.
Nigel?
Yeah, and I hope Heather Hallett will actually make interim reports when she finally gets her inquiry going. At least she'll be able to start taking evidence in the next couple of weeks, but it would be handy if Rishi Sunak provided the material that he's meant to help her. On a report like this, it seems to be this is the kind of thing that should inform, as Alex says, inform such an inquiry. I think that there is some danger with thinking in hindsight now about what happened at the time. If you remember, when we did go into lockdown, it was the only measure that seemed to be on the table at the time.
Nigel, this is not. See, what a lot of people say now is, oh, all these people coming out with their hindsights, and a lot of people from day one, I wasn't one of them on day one, but a lot of people on day one were saying that this wasn't the only option. As it progressed, I mean, I was terrified of COVID at first. I was pregnant, and then I soon started waking up and going, hang on a second, this doesn't stack up. There were other options that weren't properly explored. Things like the Great Barrington Declaration. There were situations at the time where people were screaming from the rooftops, this is going to destroy the country as we know it, these lockdown measures.
Which is what the inquiry will decide, whether those measures were proportionate. But what the report also seems to say is that lockdowns, call it what you will, but restrictions, did work provided they were voluntary. So Alex mentioned mentioned Sweden there. Sweden ended up with proportionally half the number of deaths that we did, although by not having lockdowns because people voluntarily kept away from each other. So the basic restrictions the report is arguing were right. It's the making them compulsory that was actually wrong. But again, we're looking back to what we do know from the early days there is when you locked down, infections went down. When you lifted restrictions, infections went up. And a lot of things have changed.
Well, you know what? Some of you getting in touch saying, oh, Michelle, will you change the record? Pack it in. Talking about COVID, life has moved on. I always say the same to that thing, don't I? Look, life hasn't really moved on. Lots of experiences that we have in this country today can be directly traced back to the response of COVID, whether it's your NHS and the mess that's in, the economy, the debt, the money, the finances, inflation, so much of it, I promise you, can be traced back to those decisions. Lots of you getting in touch about universal basic income, saying, one of you saying, Michelle, please do not be quick as you are to dismiss this. There are lots of advantages to universal basic income. Well, I'll leave it with you guys to tell me some of them then and try and convince me, because so far Nigel Nelson didn't manage to do that. Lots of people asking, where would that money come from? No such thing as a free lunch. I completely agree with you. What would be the effect on small businesses trying to employ people, Bob asks, if people are incentivised not to go and work? Well, you see it in these times right now, don't you? We've got a huge amount of people currently economically inactive. Chris says, keep doing what you're doing, Michelle. I love your programme and your guest tonight. Ray has messaged in saying, please, can you give me the name of the presenter on GB News right now? Ray, my name is Michelle Dewberry. I've been with you from 6. I shall be back again tomorrow at 7. But for now, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Even though I think you're absolutely bonkers, Nigel, I've enjoyed the conversation nonetheless. Have a fantastic evening, everybody. Don't go anywhere. Nigel Farage is up next. If you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I need to go out, what shall I do? Well, take us on your radio, DAB+, wherever you go. We are with you. But for now, have a good one. And I will see you again 6 till 7 tomorrow. Good night.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.